Last night, we sunk their prize ship, the Submarine. Like POTUS got him twice.
Releasing this new video of long-range missiles used in Operation Epic Fury.
Explosions shook many cities across Iran, including its capital, Tehran. Videos from East Tehran and the breaking news tonight showed that a possible military strike on Iran could happen as soon as Saturday, according to top national security officials. At 0247 local time, 6 Navy SEALs rolled backward off the deck of a shallow water combat submersible and into 78-degree black Persian Gulf water, 14 nautical miles southeast of Bandar Abbas, Iran. They made almost no splash. The Mark 11 mini-sub that had carried them, all 22 feet and 5 tons of it, was already turning back toward its mother platform, an Ohio-class guided missile submarine sitting at 150 feet somewhere in the Gulf of Oman. The SEALs were alone now, 6 men breathing pure oxygen through Draeger rebreathers that would not make a single bubble, swimming toward a cable they could not see, buried in silt they could not yet feel in waters controlled by a Navy that had mined the Strait of Hormuz 6 weeks earlier. The cable they were looking for carried 2.56 terabits per second of data capacity, enough to stream 640,000 high-definition videos at the same time. It was one part of the Falcon system, the Flag Alcatel Lucent Optical Network, an 11,859-kilometer repeater submarine cable linking 11 countries across 4 continents. The part that mattered tonight was the one running from Mumbai to Bandar Abbas, crossing 1,400 kilometers of Arabian seafloor before climbing the continental shelf and landing on Iranian soil. The whole Falcon system had cost about $400 million to build. The part feeding Iran's southern coast, the part these 6 divers were swimming toward, represented about $35 million in cable, repeaters, and shore-end infrastructure. The Draeger LARV rebreathers strapped to their chests cost $8,000 each. 6 divers, $48,000 in breathing gear, swimming toward $35 million in fiber optic cable that carried a large part of Iran's military communications, financial data, and government internet traffic. Somewhere in the Pentagon, the cost comparison had already been put on a briefing slide. Nobody laughed. If you're already wondering what 6 men in Blackwater can do to a country's entire command network, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments how far you think this mission is about to go. 110 miles to the southwest, the USS Georgia, SSGN 729, sat still at 180 feet below the surface of the Gulf of Oman, 40 nautical miles south of the Strait of Hormuz. Georgia was one of 4 Ohio-class submarines changed from nuclear ballistic missile carriers into guided missile submarines. The conversion had taken 4 years and cost $700 million per boat. What it bought was a submarine that could carry 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, and at the same time serve as a floating special operations base, complete with 2 dry deck shelters mounted behind the sail, each able to hold and launch a sealed delivery vehicle without ever surfacing. Georgia had launched the Mark 11 SWCS 3 hours earlier. Now she waited, running on nuclear power that would not need refueling for 20 years, listening to the ocean through a sonar system that could hear a shrimp snap its claw 8 miles away. 14 nautical miles southeast of Bandar Abbas, the 6 SEALs were swimming in a loose diamond shape at a depth of 40 feet. Their Draeger rebreathers recycled breathed-out air through a chemical scrubber that absorbed carbon dioxide and released oxygen back into the breathing loop. No bubbles, no exhaust, no heat signature. A patrol boat could pass right overhead and its crew would see nothing but dark water. The SEALs navigated using wrist-mounted dive computers synced to an inertial navigation system that had been calibrated aboard the Mark 11 before launch. They knew their position within 3 meters. They needed that accuracy because the cable they were looking for was thinner than most people would think. A submarine fiber optic cable out in deep water is about 17 millimeters in diameter, about as wide as a garden hose. It contains hair-thin glass fibers wrapped in steel wire, covered in copper conductor and sheathed in polyethylene. Near shore, where anchors, fishing trawlers, and currents are a threat, the cable gets armored double-armored shore-end cable can be 50 millimeters thick, wrapped in layers of galvanized steel wire and buried in a trench up to 2 meters deep under the seabed. That was the version the SEALs were swimming toward. Not a garden hose, but a steel-wrapped, trench-buried 50 millimeter armored cable sitting in a groove cut into the ocean floor. They had the tools to find it, and they had the tools to cut it. 22 miles north on Keshem Island, the largest island in the Strait of Hormuz. An IRGC Navy radar station was scanning the surface of the strait with search radar that could detect a vessel as small as a fishing skiff at 40 kilometers. Keshem sits 14 miles from Bandar Abbas, parallel to the Iranian coast, and the IRGC had turned it into a fortress. Coastal defense batteries armed with Noor anti-ship cruise missiles, the Iranian-built version of the Chinese C-802, sat hidden along the southern shoreline. Each Noor carried a 165-kilogram warhead at 295 miles per hour with a range of 120 kilometers, skimming the sea at 20 meters above the waves. The IRGC had at least 6 C-14 class fast attack boats staged in hidden pens on Keshem's southern coast, each able to go 50 knots and armed with 4 short-range anti-ship missiles. Between the radar, the missiles, the fast boats, and the mines that had been spread across the shipping lanes, the Strait of Hormuz was one of the most watched and defended waterways on the planet. None of it could see 40 feet below the surface. That was the whole plan. Not stealth aircraft, not electronic warfare, not cyber operations. 6 men underwater with hand tools in the dark. Total mission cost, including the SWCS transit, but not including the submarine, came to less than $2 million. They were about to cause damage that would cost about 6 months and $35 million to repair in waters where no cable ship could safely work because Iran's own mines made the approach suicidal. What the IRGC watch officer on Keshem Island did not know was that the 6 divers were not the only American presence in the water that night, and the cable was not the only target. 37,000 feet above the Gulf of Oman, an MQ-9 Reaper drone, a $34 million unmanned aircraft with a wingspan of 66 feet, was flying in a racetrack orbit at 230 miles per hour. Its multispectral targeting system was pointed straight down, watching the infrared signature of every vessel within a 40-mile radius. The Reaper's synthetic aperture radar could identify a small boat by its hull shape at 25 nautical miles. Tonight, its job was not to strike anything. Its job was to count patrol boats and tell Georgia if any of them turned south toward the dive team. 12 miles east of the dive team, a P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, $175 million modified Boeing 737, was flying at 28,000 feet on what looked like a routine anti-submarine warfare patrol. It had already dropped a line of 16 sonobuoys and a passive barrier across the approaches to the dive site. Each sonobuoy, a $1,000 disposable underwater microphone, sat at a depth of 200 feet listening for the special low-frequency hum of a Ghadir-class submarine's diesel-electric motor. Iran had 23 of these boats. Each one was 95 feet long, displaced 120 tons, and could operate in waters as shallow as 30 meters. A Ghadir running on its electric motor at creep speed was one of the quietest diesel submarines in the region. If one of them was anywhere near the dive site, the sonobuoys would hear it, the P-8 would identify it, and Georgia would be ready. The SEALs reached the cable at 0319 local time after 32 minutes of swimming at a pace of about half a knot. The lead diver, the team's explosive ordnance disposal specialist, found the burial trench first. He signaled with a squeeze on the buddy line. 2 taps, cable found. The trench was a shallow groove in the silty bottom, about 1 meter wide and 1 meter deep, filled with sediment that had settled back over the cable since it was first buried. The shore-end armored cable lay under that sediment like a steel vein running toward the coast. 2 divers began clearing silt by hand. No powered tools, no jet pumps. Sound travels 4 times faster underwater than in air, and at 14 nautical miles from an IRGC naval base, every decibel mattered. They cleared a 3-meter section of cable in 11 minutes, working by touch in zero visibility water, their gloved hands following the stiff curve of the armored sheath. The cable came out of the silt like a black pipe, 50 millimeters thick, cold to the touch even in the warm water. Its double layer of galvanized steel wire was wrapped so tightly that it felt like solid metal. 900 nautical miles to the northwest in the Combined Air Operations Center at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. A watch officer was tracking 7 different operations at the same time on a wall of screens the size of a tennis court. One of those screens showed the position of every known IRGC surface vessel in the Persian Gulf, updated every 90 seconds by a mix of satellite feeds, Reaper drone footage, and signals intelligence. The screen showed 3 fast attack boats berthed at Kesham Island, 2 patrol boats running a predictable figure-8 pattern 8 miles east of the dive site, and 1 Ghadir submarine last detected, leaving Bandar Abbas 6 hours ago, current position unknown. That last item was highlighted in amber. Back at the cable, the EOD specialist was putting together a hydraulic cable cutter, a tool made to shear through double-armored submarine cable in a single squeeze. The cutter weighed 23 pounds underwater and generated 14 tons of cutting force from a hand-pumped hydraulic cylinder. It was not an explosive device. It would not blow up. It would not create a shockwave. It would simply close its jaws around the cable and press until the steel armor, the copper conductor, the steel tension wires, and the glass fibers inside all gave way to 14 tons of mechanical force. The result would be a clean cut, 2 severed ends, and silence on every circuit that ran through that segment. 8 miles east, one of the 2 IRGC patrol boats changed course. The P-8 Poseidon saw it first. The AN/APN-154 radar aboard the aircraft painted the patrol boat at 7.8 nautical miles from the dive site, heading southwest at 12 knots. At that speed, it would reach the dive location in about 39 minutes. The P-8 passed the track to Georgia. Georgia passed it to the dive team through an encrypted, extremely low-frequency burst that the team's underwater communications receiver translated into a 4-character code on the lead diver's wrist display. The code read, SAIL. It meant, surface contact approaching, continue mission 3-0 plus minutes to contact. The EOD specialist positioned the cutter jaws around the cable. 50 millimeters of armored fiber optic cable carrying somewhere between 400 gigabits and 2.56 terabits of live data traffic at that moment. Government communications, military command and control, banking transactions, civilian, internet, every email, every phone call, every encrypted military message flowing through Iran's southern digital gateway was about to go through the same 50-millimeter bottleneck that was now sitting between the jaws of a hand tool operated by a man in a wetsuit. He pumped the hydraulic handle 8 times. On the 9th pump, the jaws closed all the way. The cable resisted for a tiny part of a second, then gave way. The galvanized steel armor split. The copper conductor snapped. The glass fibers, each one thinner than a human hair, shattered at once. The 2 severed ends separated by 3 inches. The tension in the cable pulled them apart. At 03:41 local time, every circuit on the Falcon submarine cable segment between Mumbai and Bandar Abbas went dark. In Tehran, 700 miles to the northwest, the effects arrived at the speed of light. Network operations centers registered the loss within 200 milliseconds. Automated failover systems began rerouting traffic through other paths, but the Falcon segment carried unique routing for Iran's southern military district. The alternatives were slower, less secure, and ran through infrastructure that the United States already had the ability to monitor. The rerouted traffic would pass through nodes in Oman and the UAE, countries whose signals intelligence ties with Washington were among the closest in the region. Iran had just lost its most secure southern data pipe, and every backup path led through rooms where people were already listening. The patrol boat was now 5.6 miles from the dive site, still heading southwest at 12 knots. The Reaper overhead counted 6 crew members on its thermal camera. The boat was a Hindajan-class patrol craft, 90 feet long, armed with a 23mm cannon and 2 heavy machine guns. It was not searching, it was carrying out a routine coastal patrol, following a track it had run 4 nights a week for the past 3 months. But routines have a geometry, and that geometry was about to cross paths, with 6 Americans at 40 feet. The SEALs were already moving. The lead diver gave the signal to pull back the moment the cable split. 2 divers packed the hydraulic cutter. two secured the severed cable ends in their original trench position, packing silt over the cut to hide the damage from a visual inspection. The last two were already swimming south toward the extraction point, a set of GPS coordinates 2.1 nautical miles offshore, where the Mark 11 SWCS would be waiting in 47 minutes. 12 miles east, the P-8 Poseidon dropped 4 more sonobuoys in an arc south of the dive site. The sonobuoys were AN/SSQ-53FDI FAR units, directional frequency analysis, and recording buoys. Each one had a hydrophone that could detect submarine noise at ranges beyond 10 nautical miles. The P-8 crew was not worried about the patrol boat. They were worried about the Ghadir. The Ghadir submarine that had left Bandar Abbas 6 hours earlier had not been detected since. A Ghadir running on its electric motor at 4 knots makes a sound signature that can mix with normal ocean noise in the shallow, warm, sound-cluttered waters of the Persian Gulf. The Gulf's average depth is only 50 meters. Thermoclines shift in unpredictable ways. Biological noise from shrimp, fish, and coral competes with mechanical noise on every frequency. Finding a quiet diesel submarine in the Persian Gulf is one of the hardest problems in naval warfare, and the Ghadir was made for exactly these waters, 40 nautical miles south of the strait aboard Georgia. The sonar team heard something, a faint tone at 137 hertz, bearing 042, consistent with the auxiliary cooling pump of a Ghadir-class submarine. The contact was on and off. It appeared for 11 seconds, disappeared for 30, and came back for 8. At that bearing, it was somewhere northeast of the dive team, possibly between the team and Bandar Abbas, possibly between the team and the patrol boat. The fire control coordinator quietly gave it a track number and began building a firing solution on the Mark 48 Advanced Capability Torpedo System. A Mark 48A DCAP weighs 3,500 pounds, travels at 55 knots, carries a 650-pound warhead, and costs $4.2 million. Georgia carried 12 of them. Nobody was planning to use one tonight, but planning not to use a weapon and being unready to use one are two different positions. The SEALs were 800 meters into their extraction swim. 6 men in a line abreast formation, swimming at 40 feet, 1.3 nautical miles from the extraction point. Their rebreathers had 90 minutes of oxygen left. The patrol boat was now 3.2 miles northwest and moving away. Its course was taking it past the dive site without stopping. The 137 hertz contact had gone silent. The Reaper saw nothing on the surface within 20 miles except fishing boats and the departing patrol craft. At 03:58 local time, the IRGC watch officer on Keshem Island received a report from the Telecommunications Infrastructure Company of Iran. The Falcon cable segment to Bandar Abbas had suffered a total loss of signal. All circuits down, no warning, no slow decline. The watch officer noted the report, logged it, and sent it to the IRGC Navy's Regional Command. Cable faults happen, anchors drag across them, fishing trawlers catch them, earthquakes shift the seabed. The watch officer had seen 3 cable faults in the past 2 years. There was no protocol that linked a cable fault to a security event, not yet. By the time anyone in Tehran connected the timing of the cable loss to the possibility of deliberate sabotage, the SEALs would be inside the Mark 11. The Mark 11 would be inside the dry deck shelter, and the dry deck shelter would be sealed to the hull of a submarine that could outrun every ship in the Iranian Navy while sitting at 400 feet. 2.1 nautical miles south of the cut, the Mark 11 SWCS weighted at 60 feet, its electric motor holding position against a mild southeasterly current. The pilot had brought the submersible to the extraction coordinates 15 minutes early and parked it on the bottom, running dark, using passive sonar to listen for the dive team's approach. The Mark 11's lithium-ion batteries had 5 hours of endurance left. It had high-frequency sonar for obstacle avoidance, an inertial navigation system, GPS for surface fixes, and a crew of 2 who had practiced this exact extraction profile 14 times in the waters off San Clemente Island, California, before deploying. The pilot heard the dive team's approach at 04:23 local time. Steady fin kicks. 6 sets. The sound was clear to a trained ear and invisible to anything that was not specifically listening for it. The 6 divers reached the submersible at 04:26. They locked onto the external handholds, confirmed head count with squeeze signals, and the pilot lifted the Mark 11 off the bottom and turned south at 4 knots. Extraction swim complete. Total time in the water, 1 hour and 39 minutes. Total time on the cable, 22 minutes. 110 miles to the southwest, Georgia came up to 60 feet and extended her communications mast. She received a single encrypted burst from the SWCS-4 characters. Blue. Mission complete. Returning. The captain acknowledged, pulled the mast back in, and took Georgia down again to 180 feet to wait. In 3 hours, the Mark 11 would dock with the dry deck shelter. The SEALs would climb through the lockout chamber into the warm, pressurized inside of a 560-foot nuclear submarine. They would eat. They would sleep. An 18,750-ton American submarine would turn west and disappear into the Arabian Sea at 25 knots without ever being detected. The cost of the whole operation, divers, equipment, submersible transit, and aircraft support came to less than $3 million. The cost of repairing the cable, assuming Iran could get a cable repair ship to the site through its own minefields, past its own coastal defenses, in waters where American submarines had just shown they could operate without being detected, was $35.00 million in 6 months. And that assumed the new cable would not be cut again. In Bandar Abbas, the IRGC, Navy Southern Command, was still treating the cable loss as a maintenance problem. A repair request had been filed with the Telecommunications Infrastructure Company. The company had contacted the International Cable Consortium that managed the Falcon system. The consortium had told them that no cable repair ship could enter the area because of the active mine threat and ongoing hostilities in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran had built a wall of mines to keep the American Navy out. That same wall now kept the cable repair ships from coming in. The mines Iran had laid to defend the strait were now defending the damage the Americans had just caused. The cost of those mines, about $10,000 to $50,000 each, was now working against the $35.00 million cable they were supposed to protect. Somewhere in Norfolk, Virginia, a Navy planning officer was probably already drafting the brief for the next segment. It was 05:17 local time. The sky over the Gulf of Oman was turning violet in the east. The P-8 Poseidon banked south toward its base in Bahrain. The Reaper kept circling. Its cameras were now watching a fishing dhow that was either a fishing dhow or an IRGC surveillance vessel. The difference had not mattered for 2 hours and did not matter now. The 137 Hertz contact never appeared again. The Gadir, if it had been a Gadir, was either on the bottom with its motor off or had left the area. Georgia would never know. That was fine. Georgia did not need to know. Georgia needed the SEALs back, the dry deck shelter sealed, and 400 feet of water overhead. Everything else was someone else's problem. By 0600, the Mark 11 SWCS was inside the dry deck shelter. The shelter was flooded, the outer doors sealed, and the dewatering pumps were starting the 40-minute process of draining the chamber so the inner hatch could open. The 6 SEALs sat in the flooded chamber, still in their wetsuits, still breathing from their rebreathers, waiting for the water level to drop below their heads. The mission debrief would begin in 2 hours. The intelligence assessment of the cable cut's effect on Iranian military communications would begin in 4 hours. The second mission against a different cable segment, 200 nautical miles to the east near Chabahar, was already scheduled for 3 nights from now. Iran had 2 submarine cable landing stations. After tonight, it had one that worked. In 72 hours, if everything went according to plan, it would have none. The $400 million Falcon cable system was about to learn what a $48,000 set of rebreathers and a $200 hydraulic cutter could do in the right hands. If you enjoyed this video, check out the other video on how the U.S. Navy cleared Iran's mines from the Strait of Hormuz. Bye for now.